Hi, this is Morley and this is the M-Wire. Folks, I'm here to tell you that the situation between Russia, NATO, the United States, and the EU is rapidly deteriorating. When I say rapidly deteriorating, I mean that. There's a lot of words that are being said now, and it's looking very bad in terms of the troops that are built up on both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side of the border. This is a very multifaceted story. Now, what I'm about to give you today is just a snippet of what's really going on total. I'm going to be making more content about this weekend, but just due to time constraints right now, I'm just going to give you the gist of it, and I'm going to elaborate in more content this weekend. Before making this video, I just checked Fox News to see if they are reporting on this whatsoever, and I couldn't even so much as find a little blurb in the corner talking about what I'm about to talk about today. That's how important this story is to the West. But this is a very serious situation that is brewing between Russia and Ukraine that could potentially affect the entire world. There's so much information about this coming in that I'm at odds where to begin. There is so much, like I said, this is a very multifaceted story. And I guess I'll just start with what happened a couple of days ago. Now, 2 days ago, Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, made a speech, and he essentially said that he does not want NATO to expand to any more countries in the European Union. Now, that mirrors what I said in my previous update on this situation about they do not want the Ukraine to join NATO. So that is consistent with that statement. So he basically said that he wants some sort of legal guarantee, if you will, that no other countries will join NATO in Europe. He feels threatened that other countries joining NATO in Europe will allow NATO to essentially put nuclear weapons closer to the Russian border, which is too close for his comfort and whatnot. And he's basically said that any countries that join NATO without his permission will be considered an aggressive action, if you will. So both sides are not backing down here, folks. It appears that both the EU and NATO are pretty much dismissive of what Vladimir Putin has to say about all this. And they're not taking him seriously, and the insults are starting to come, and relations overall between everybody is deteriorating rapidly. But I'm going to get into this one article that gives you an idea of what's really happening here and where we're at and where this could potentially go. Like I said, I'm going to make a lot more content on this over the weekend because this is a very multifaceted story with a lot of plots and subplots, if you will, that all tie into one another, and it just can't be done in one video. But let's get into this one article so you understand exactly where Vladimir Putin's at this point. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday sternly warned NATO against deploying its troops and weapons to Ukraine, saying it represents a red line for Russia and would trigger a strong response. Commenting on Western concerns about Russia's alleged intention to invade Ukraine, he said that Moscow is equally worried about NATO drills near its borders. Speaking to participants on an online investment forum, Putin said that NATO's eastward expansion has threatened Russia's core security interests. He expressed concern that NATO could eventually use the Ukrainian territory to deploy missiles capable of reaching Moscow in just 5 minutes. So Vladimir Putin basically says, no more countries are joining NATO unless you ask me if it's okay. And NATO is completely dismissive of that, and they're essentially said, well, we'll admit anybody who we like, thank you. So they are completely at odds as to which countries can and cannot join NATO. The emergence of such threats represents a red line for us, Putin said. I hope that it will not get to common sense and responsibility for their own countries, and the global community will eventually prevail. He added that Russia has been forced to counter the growing threats by developing new hypersonic weapons. What should we do? Putin said. We would need to develop something similar to target those who threaten us. And we can do that even now. He said a new hypersonic missile that is set to enter service with the Russian Navy early next year would be capable of reaching targets in comparable time. It would also need just 5 minutes to reach those who issue orders, Putin said. So here we are, folks. They're already talking about nukes here, okay? Now, Russia has a lot of sophisticated weapons. They have nuclear weapons that they could launch that break off into 10 smaller nukes and can hit 10 targets simultaneously. They have a nuclear weapon called Poseidon, which is basically a nuclear missile that swims around the ocean all on its own. Like, these things are out there right now, and they just swim about the ocean. Like, they can do this for 20 years without even needing servicing, apparently. And they could just detonate one of these, causing a mega tsunami wherever they like. And obviously, if the Allies even found one of these, they wouldn't dare try to intercept it, because if the Russians were aware that it was being tampered with, they could simply detonate it, and that would be very, very dire. The Zircon hypersonic cruise missile, capable of flying at 9 times the speed of sound to a range of 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, has undergone a series of tests, most recently Monday. Ukrainian and Western officials have expressed worries this month that a Russian military buildup near Ukraine could signal plans by Moscow to invade its ex-Soviet neighbor. NATO foreign ministers warned Russia on Tuesday that any attempt to further destabilize Ukraine would be a costly mistake. The Kremlin has insisted it has no such intention and has accused Ukraine and its Western backers of making the claims to cover up their own alleged aggressive designs. So both sides here are basically saying, you said this and you're doing this and I'm doing this and I didn't do that, and it's just dilapidating. There's no real, meaningful dialogue between these countries. They're just accusing each other of doing these things, and that's why this situation is exacerbating so quickly. Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014 after the country's Kremlin-friendly president was driven from power by mass protests and also threw its weight behind a separatist insurgency that broke out in Ukraine's east. Earlier this year, a spike in ceasefire violations in the end of a Russian troop concentration near Ukraine fueled war fears, but tensions abated when Moscow pulled back the bulk of its forces after maneuvers in April. Putin argued that to avoid tensions, Russia and the West should negotiate agreements that would safeguard each party's security interests. The matter is not whether to send troops or not, to go to war or not, but to establish a more fair and stable development and taking into account security interests of all international players, he replied, when asked if Russia was going to invade Ukraine. If we sincerely strive for that, no one will fear any threats. The Russian leader noted that Russia has worried about NATO drills near its borders, pointing at a recent exercise that involved U.S. strategic bombers. Strategic bombers, which carry precision weapons and are capable of carrying nuclear weapons, were flying as close as 20 kilometers, 12 miles to our border, Putin said. That represents a threat to us. So as you can see, folks, both sides here have been doing, shall we say, provocative maneuvers of one sort or another, much to the dismay of the other party. So this doesn't seem to be de-escalating because both parties think that they're right, and no one's willing to back down here so far. And this situation just keeps, getting ratcheted up, if you will. After the buildup of Russian troops near Ukraine this year, Putin and U.S. President Joe Biden held a June summit in Geneva, where they agreed to launch a dialogue on strategic stability and cybersecurity. Putin on Tuesday hailed the cybersecurity discussions between Russia and U.S. experts, saying, just as with the pandemic, it is necessary to pool efforts to work efficiently. Asked about reports on plans for a Biden-Putin call next month, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters Tuesday aboard Air Force One that she doesn't have anything to predict or preview at this point, adding that obviously we remain in touch as to follow up on the summit this summer at high level with Russian counterparts. Responding to a question about the threat of a Russian invasion in Ukraine, Psaki said, "We're deeply concerned about the heightened rhetoric about the reported military buildup at the border." In Russia, when asked about Biden possibly seeking a second term, Putin said he thought that it would help political stability in the U.S. The Russian leader drew a parallel with his own re-election plans. Even though Putin hasn't decided whether to seek another term before his current one ends in 2024, he said the possibility of him staying on has helped Russia's stability. The 69-year-old president has been in power for more than 2 decades, longer than any other Kremlin leader since Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Constitutional amendments were approved in 2020 reset Putin's previous term limits, allowing him to run for president 2 more times and hold on to power into 2036. In line with the Constitution, I have the right to get re-elected to seek a new term, but I haven't yet made up my mind whether or not to do it, Putin said. But the very existence of that right already stabilizes the domestic political situation. Asked about China's nuclear buildup, Putin said that Russia isn't worried about it, adding that close ties between Moscow and Beijing are a major factor in global stability. So as you can see, both sides here are convinced that they're right and the other is wrong, and neither seems to be blinking here. So we'll watch and we'll wait as to what will happen with this situation, whether it results in a regional war or perhaps even, dare I say it, a world war. Because that's not exactly off the table either, to be quite honest. I will be, as I say, bringing you more on this story this weekend. There's a lot to digest here. I'm still mentally disseminating it, if you will. But here in the West, they're not even really reporting on this. I checked Fox News, and there's not even so much as a little blurb about this story in the corner somewhere. But thank you so much for coming along with me to this update. Folks, please share this video. Like I say, this news is not even hardly being reported, and I would greatly appreciate it if you'd share it. Please remember to like, to comment, to share, and subscribe, of course. And until the next update, God bless.